You're listening to the Remnant Voice Podcast, a teaching podcast where the ancient faith equips the modern witness. I'm your host, Jason Armstrong. Join me as we navigate this new era via the old path. So last week we looked at Elijah from probably a different perspective than most of us are used to. We talked about what happens after the fire falls, and some of the greatest opportunities for us to have, attacks and things come against us is often after great victories, and how we saw how Elijah, which James tells us that we're men of like passions, right? We have a like nature, like passions similar to that of Elijah. And we talked about the traumas that Elijah went through ministry. I mean, you can have trauma in ministry. You can have church traumas and things like that. Hello, as a believer, you can go through those things, And so I believe one of our main values with the Garden Fellowship here is that we're cultivating wholeness. And our first time together, we shared the vision of the Wholeness Center and all the things that we believe the Lord's going to be doing. And so on that side of things, we're all for deliverance and casting out devils, but also healing the sick, right? And that's not just healing the sick in body, but also healing the sick in mind. And so when there's traumas, when there's demonic oppression, depression, possession, all the different things, being demonized, all that stuff, there's also, our soul becomes fragmented in those things. We talked about Jesus's, I'm doing a little bit of a recap from last week for those that'll be hearing this week. We talked about how Jesus' sweat became great drops of blood, and the acts of redemption and healing of the mind even started there in the garden. And then how it went from a garden to a tree, right, with the thorns, and within the thorns and the thistles that Adam was supposed to tend by the sweat of the brow. And then the thorns that pierced Christ's brow, a second flowing of the blood. So he had a blood in the garden and the blood from the thorns. So that's the only place you see twice where blood came from him. You see blood from his hands, blood from his side, blood from his feet, but only 2 times did it come from the mind, from the head. And so it's a picture of things being fully whole, and then how we walk in that wholeness of everything that he paid for, because he bore our griefs. We talked about that, right? Isaiah 53. He bore our griefs, and the atonement, right? His atonement assumes and envelops, those traumas and things that we might experience. And I've always thought of trauma as being, just a certain thing, you go through some type of addiction or go through some type of brokenness here or there, whatever, and that's a trauma. But there's all kinds of traumas that we experience through life. If you're a human, if you're a human being and you've been on this earth for any few minutes, you've experienced some trauma in your life one way or another. You may not realize it, may not recognize it, but you have. And so we dove into Elijah and what he looked like, and how the enemy tries to use prophetic imagination as he saw the prophets of Baal being slain, which was the right thing, right? That imagery and that grotesque imagery of all the blood and the gore and all the things that happened got into his image center. And when he heard the wrong message by Jezebel, messenger saying, hey, I'm going to do this to you the same way you did to them by this time tomorrow, he started fixating on that and started rehearsing what we called Elijah syndrome. Right? We started rehearsing on Elijah syndrome, where he was saying, I alone am left. And we know for a fact he wasn't alone. Even Obadiah mentioned to him, hey, I've got prophets hidden in a cave. You're not alone. But yet his trauma kept talking about he was alone. So he had this mindset. And then when he goes into the cave, the same thing. The Lord says, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Well, Lord, you know how I've been zealous for you and all these things, and I alone am left. And the Lord's like, no, let me recorrect your narrative, right? He says, let me recorrect your narrative. No, I've got 7,000 that haven't bowed their knee or kissed Baal, right? So you can see how this was playing through him, and that's why he had angelic assistance, right? With the bread and the cake, the bread and then the water that was placed where? Not at his hands. Where was it placed?
At his head.
At his head. All right, so that's just a little bit of review. Today we're going to look at Peter in relationship to wholeness, and Peter in relationship to restoration and those type of things. So again, let's go, what did I say, John? Man, I've been all over the Gospels this morning, looking at all the different accounts in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, as well as John, but I think we're going to come from John mostly. John, did I say John 13?
Right.
Okay, let's get there. Let me get there. John chapter 13. So again, it's interesting too that this is kind of what's propping up, because you're in this time and in this season, and in the story of the gospel is what's happening. You're getting close to the Passover and the Passion Week of Christ that's happening here, and we get the Last Supper that's going on. Jesus has washed the disciples' feet by now, and then he's at the table and he starts talking to them. One of you is going to betray me, but then he goes on to talk about the Son of Man is going to be glorified. And all these things that's there. And he starts talking in verse 13 and let's look at 31. When he gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I'm with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, and now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you." So notice here he's putting the stipulations on how to love. You're not loving according to this. You're loving by my standard, how I manifested that to you, how I demonstrated that to you. Just as I love you, also to love one another. By this, all people know that you're my disciples. Verse 36, Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered and said, "Where I'm going, you cannot follow me." But look at this. But you what?
Will follow later.
But you will follow. So we don't talk about gifts of the Spirit in the flow here. But he's prophesying over them. He said, but you will follow after. This is a prophetic word that's hanging over Peter's life. You will follow after. Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me what?
3 times.
So he said, you're going to deny me 3 different occasions before the rooster crows. There's coming a night season, a time of testing, a time of trial where you're going to go through some stuff and you're going to deny me in the midst of this. And he's putting a time frame on it. He says, by the time the rooster crows, you will have denied me 3 times. Now after that, I love chapter 14. He says, but let your heart not be troubled. You see that? He said, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. So he's giving them a farewell discourse. That's what that's called. He's giving them the farewell discourse. And then he's saying, look, be comforted. Don't let your heart be troubled in the midst of this. Now, let's go John chapter 18. Let's flip on over. I love this because he's saying, Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, John 14. John 15 is amazing. He starts talking about abiding in the vine. So we got to think about what's happening here as he gives them the farewell discourse. He's saying, don't let your heart be troubled. Abide in me. He's saying all these things, right? John 15. Then we get over to 16. He says, the world's going to hate you. John 17, he's talking about his prayer. He prays to the Father on behalf of those. He says that your sorrow is going to turn to joy, all these type of things that's happening. He says, fear not, I've overcome the world, all these things. John 17 is his high priestly prayer. That's really the Lord's Prayer. We talk about Matthew 6, but John 17 is really the Lord's Prayer there. And then we get over to John 18. I'm going to set the scene here. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with the disciples across the Kidron Valley. He was over at the Mount. He was at the Mount of Olives. Let's set the scene. You got the Mount of Olives. You got the Temple Mount area walls of Jerusalem, the eastern gate, the temple, all that. You're on two valleys or two tops, two mountains, and you got the valley in between, the Kidron Valley. Jesus, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley where there was a what? Say it. A garden. I love how John puts it here. Which he and his disciples entered. Now, Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place. For Jesus did what? Says he often met there with his disciples. Where did he often meet with his disciples? Hey, come on, somebody. Where did he meet with them? Come on. That should trigger a thought. That should echo of Eden there, right? Where did the Lord meet with mankind originally? He met with them in the cool of the day, walked with them, fellowshiped with them, talked with them, had communion with them, right? That's why we call it the garden. This garden was significant because it was the Garden of Gethsemane, the garden of crushing, the garden of pressing. It's all these olive trees that are there. And it's I love the setting because even the geography preaches. Can we talk about cosmic geography here? Understanding a divine counsel, worldview, and all those things. And so this place, this in-between place, this place of crushing of these olives, Jesus often met with his disciples in the garden, this place of formation, spiritual formation, this place of discipleship, this place, he's even in this place of olives, it's impending that crushing is coming if you need oil, right? He often met with the disciples there. This is where Judas enters, because Judas knows the place. Doesn't mean he was necessarily formed by it, right? You can show up at a place and not actually submit to the process of being formed, right? Come on. Just because you attend doesn't mean you're being shaped. Doesn't mean you're being conformed. Doesn't mean you're having your mind renewed. This is the encounter there. Let's go. Jesus talks again here. He gets identified by Judas with the kiss. I'm not wanting to highlight all that necessarily. Just want to know that this is where the confrontation is happening. Jesus is being arrested. He's being betrayed. He's being arrested in this place of the garden. I submit to you to read it across the Gospels. Look at the different way that each one presents it. But then here, let's go over to verse 15. John chapter 18 and verse 15. We're going to spend some time right through here. John chapter 18, verse 15. It says, Jesus was being taken from the garden over to the Temple Mount area. In that area was Caiaphas' house. Caiaphas was the high priest of the time. And so he's being put on trial by the Jews here. They're having to formally charge him before they can bring him to the Roman government. And so this is what's happening. It says in verse 15, remember, this is Simon Peter. It says, Simon Peter followed Jesus. Some of your Bibles may actually say followed at a distance. Anybody's Bible say that? Some of them will say it there. It says Simon Peter followed Jesus. Some will say followed at a distance. Other gospel, does yours say it?
Not John, but it does.
Yeah, in the other Gospels, you'll see in Matthew, Mark, or Luke.
It was like he was going to be just far enough, so he did.
Yeah, it says, and Simon followed Jesus at a distance. And so did, and then here in John, it says, Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now, history, some scholars will say that this other disciple is John, John the Beloved. Since this disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door. So the other disciple, who possibly is John, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You also are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" Peter says, "I'm not." Now the servants and officers had made a what?
Charcoal fire.
Fire.
Charcoal fire. Some will say fire, just fire. Others put the emphasis on the charcoal fire. Because it was cold and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. What's amazing too, you'll see in other witness accounts in other gospels, Peter was sitting with them. He was by the fire, sitting with them. Here he's standing. But either way, you're seeing this played out. The emphasis is that Peter's inside this temple court area where Jesus is on trial, and Peter is being questioned. Hey, aren't you one of his followers? Right? And Peter's by this charcoal fire denying Jesus, denying that he's a disciple of Jesus by the fire. You see that? Because it was cold and they were standing there warming themselves. Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. Verse 19 through 24, you see this discourse going back between the high priest and the real high priest, Jesus. But the high priest and Jesus. Come on, I just had to throw that in there. Between the high priest Caiaphas and Jesus, going back and trying to get him accused of blasphemy and all the different things. Verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, you also are not one of the disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. Second time, Peter's denied him, right? One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off. Remember back in the garden scene that when all that went on, Malchus, we know that Malchus was the soldier that was there. Peter draws his sword, cuts off Malchus's ear. Jesus picks up the ear and puts it back on. He said, who lives by the sword will die by the sword. We're not about this, right? I need people to have ears to hear what I'm trying to say, so let me restore hearing, right? That's what he's putting on. And so a lot of the church religious structures and systems do the things that Peter does and cut off the ears of those who are supposed to be hearing the message of the gospel. Say a lot to that. But here you've got Malchus's relative is now who was possibly in the garden, eyewitness seeing Peter there. Did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter again, what? Third time, and then what happens? The rooster crowed.
Well, it was really not a real rooster.
Some will say it was a temple crier. Some will say it was a voice, because roosters were unclean. They wouldn't have been allowed in the temple area at that time. But either way, there was a timing on it. Peter denied him 3 times before that timing happened, right? It goes on to say that in the other accounts that he went on and wept bitterly after that. John just highlights Peter's denial. In the other gospel accounts, you'll see where Peter's denied him by the fire. Peter was following at a distance. He was by the fire. And then Peter goes from being by the fire, trying to warm himself, to now being in a trial by fire. While Jesus is on trial, Peter's also on trial by this fire. While Jesus is being affirmed in his identity, Peter is denying the identity. Jesus being accused of saying he is God. He said, I am. And back even in the garden scene, he said, I am he, and they fell down. The I am. Power was released, and they fell down. So in this trial, there's actually 2 trials that are happening here. There's the trial of Jesus and the fiery trial that Peter is going through. And in the midst of Jesus not being popular anymore, see, we've had a Jesus that's been popular, right? A Jesus that's been popular with signs, miracles, and wonders. They love following the rabbi. They love having the crowds. They love having the mega conferences. They love having all the different things and following Jesus when there's crowds and popularity. But when Jesus gets put on trial, when suffering and the message of suffering starts being entered in, and Jesus is not so popular anymore, and it's not so cool to be a Christian anymore, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to find ourselves to follow Jesus at just enough distance to keep ourselves warm? Or are we going to remain on fire for him? I don't know about you, but I've had to reconcile this. I'm like, I used to look at Peter like, man, how in the world would you do that? But I'm like, you know what? I'd be doing the same thing. 100%. How have I already done it now? In weaker circumstances. Right? And so it's just like he's by this fire, warming himself, trying to remain warm because he's at a distance. He's trying to warm himself by the wrong fire. Number one. Number two, he's on trial, denying everything that he's walked with. Denying the person that he's walked with because it's inconvenient now, because it's being tested now. But remember that even prior to this, Jesus looked at him and when they were back and said, look, you can't come after me this way, but you will follow me. Prior to that too, he also talks about the enemy has come to sift you. The enemy has come to sift you as of wheat, but I've prayed that your faith would not fail. Now, here's the thing. Jesus could have prayed him out of the trial. Why did Jesus not pray him and say, you know what, I'm just going to pray and cover you that you won't have to go through this thing?
He's not a God of prevention. He's a God of redemption.
Come on.
Plus Peter's testimony.
He says, yeah, he's like, listen here. I'm not praying you out of this fire. I'm praying that your faith would not fail through it. And so you see this played out here beautifully. Let's watch what happens. So he's denying him and again denying him. And then it says, again, he wept bitterly. Let's look at that. Go to Luke 22 for just a second. Let's look at Luke 22.
I'll mention something real quick here, if you don't mind. Going back to the denial of the rooster code.
Mm-hmm.
I like what it says in Luke in 22:61. And then the Lord turned and looked at Peter.
Yeah, where?
He remembered the word.
Yep.
It's like I can just see their eyes lock just for that second.
Oh, yeah.
And I can just imagine how Peter felt right then. And part of that is I can just see him after this happening, him going out and just falling to his knees and just sobbing bitterly because of what he was going through emotionally at that point.
Yep, that's where we're headed. Yep, that's all right. Luke 22. Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. Do you see it there? Does yours say that? 54. Luke 22:54. It says, then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire, seeing his says just kindled a fire, that John says charcoal fire, in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together. Again, John had him standing, now he's sitting. You see that? Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, and there's different ones that bring the accusation. A servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light, look at that, as he sat in the light looking closely at him, said, this man also was with him. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him. And a little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, man, I'm not. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned. This is the only account that you see this phrase in. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. So imagine that, like Doc just said. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. And I'm thinking about three different things right here. Not only the sorrow and the brokenness of seeing Jesus there and seeing everything and the reality, the weight of the reality of everything that Jesus said up to that point has now hit Peter. He's seeing that, oh my gosh, I did exactly what you just said. that I never thought I would do. I thought I would follow you all the way. And then here I have just denied you. And now I'm seeing you while you're on trial. You're going through your roughest situation. I'm nowhere to be found. I'm close enough, but I'm actually denying you. You know, I don't have a true proximity of heart, have a proximity of my body, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm dishonoring you with my lips because my heart's a little far distant from you. I'm just trying to keep myself warm because I feel the coldness of my shame, of my guilt, of my doubt, of my fear. All the things that are going on in this, because now you're being put on trial and I'm trying to follow you, but I can't follow you where you're going. Just like he said. And it's here, I believe, shame starts to enter in Peter. In this denial. There's a few other verses that talk about. Think of the Aaronic blessing. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. What's happening in this moment? The face is shining up on Peter. Jesus' face is shining up on Peter, but what's happening to Peter? Think of another one about this light of the glorious gospel in the face of Jesus Christ in Ephesians. And so the contrasting of lights that's here. It says Peter was illuminated by a fire. Like the girl recognized him by that fire. But what about the fire of Jesus that's illuminating the inner struggle that's going on in Peter here? The fiery trial that he's going through. The suffering that he's going through in the midst of this, following Jesus that's going in, that's being put on trial and is literally fulfilling the passion, headed to his passion and fulfilling what he was put here to do. And then Peter's sitting there denying it and recognizing the weight of that word that's hit him. And it says, and he went out and wept bitterly. He went out and he wept bitterly. Go back to John for a minute. Let's pick up the story in John's gospel. Let's go to John 21. Yep. Let's go to John 21. So, again, Jesus, from Peter being weeping bitterly, denying him 3 times, weeping bitterly, to crucifixion, his death, his burial, his resurrection. Jesus in a resurrected state. He's shown himself to his disciples throughout the region. Now we pick up in John 21. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples. This is verse 1. By the Sea of Tiberias. Again, this is the Sea of Galilee, Lake Gennesaret, all the same thing. Again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, the 2 other disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going what? And they said to him, we'll go with you. They went out, got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So let's think about it. Let's slow down. Think about it. That's one thing we're working on, slowing down the speed of revelation, speed of study. Death, burial, resurrection. The last time he really encountered Jesus was his denial, right? Death, burial, resurrection. We hear tales of it. We see the things of it. Jesus has appeared to some of the disciples, and now here, Peter's still. You think Peter's whole here? What do you think Peter's wrestling with? Is it okay for believers to go through some stuff and have to sort some things out? Doubt, fear, condemnation, guilt, shame. Why didn't this happen the way I thought it was going to do? I thought we were going to take over. I thought we were going to see the kingdom. I thought we were going to do all these type of things, and now this has happened. Everything that I thought was going to be, every prophetic word that's been spoken over my life, every prayer line I stood in, everything that I've prayed and interceded for, things I saw in dreams and visions, all the different things, and I'm not seeing that happen. I'm just going to go back to fishing.
I must think you blamed yourself.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to fishing. Anybody want to go fishing?
What was comfortable.
Yeah.
It was all his fault.
Let's go back to what's familiar. Remember Elijah kept rehearsing the story over and over and over in his head? You can't tell me after seeing Jesus' face like that, he's not rehearsing that story. Let that sink. Yeah. Let that sink. We don't preach like this much. We're used to these other things, and I'm used to these other things, but he's really been shaping me and slowing me down.
And as far as we know, that's the last time Peter saw Jesus.
And so he's rehearsing that in his head. I can imagine he's sitting there thinking all the time, man, I remember I walked on water with him. I did these, and then how could I go from walking on water with him to saying I don't know him? Come on. This is great. Apostle Peter. And we got so self-professing apostles and stuff today. But anyway. Okay. And I'm for that. I'm for fivefold ministry. I'm not saying not, but it looks different. I'm going fishing. They said to him, we'll go with you. They went out and get into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. That sounds familiar. Just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered and said to him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple, possibly John here, whom Jesus loved, therefore said to Peter, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard it, that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat. See, Peter's used to getting out of the boat, right? What do we know about the sea? Understanding divine counsel, worldview, and cosmic geography, what does the sea represent? Chaos, right? All things chaos and the abyss, all that stuff. And so here again, Peter's saying, I'm diving into the chaos because I'm after him. Because he's my only true source of peace. The chaos that's in me is greater than the chaos in this water. And I've got to find shalom. Stripped for work, threw himself in the sea, and the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. So 300 feet, Peter's swimming.
That's a long way.
That's a long way. Right? Let's go to Luke 5 real quick. Keep your finger there. Luke 5. You're getting your Bible in this week. Luke 5, and we'll probably start at verse 4. I'm about to bring it all home here. So Jesus has come out of the wilderness. He's went to the wedding at Cana. He's healed. He's cast the demon out of the Gadarene demoniac. He's healing. He's preaching in the synagogue. All that leads up to Luke 5. It says, on the occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret, which is also the Sea of Tiberias or Sea of Galilee. This is verse 1, Luke 5:1. And he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out from them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's. Whose boat was it? He asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep and let down your nets for a what? So Jesus is telling Peter, put your net down for a catch. Simon answered and said, Master, we have what? Toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat, come to help them. And they came and filled both the boats, so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he did what? He fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, depart from me, for I'm a sinful man. I'm a sinful man, O Lord. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And also were him, look who was with him. James and John, sons of Zebedee, were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching what? Catching men, catching people. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and did what? That was the original calling of the disciples, the original calling. So they had toiled all night, didn't catch anything, right? And then Jesus says, hey, let down your nets. At your word, I'll do it. I've toiled all night. I don't normally do this, but at your word, I'll do it. They catch the fish. And then Jesus says, look, you're not going to catch fish anymore. You're going to go catch men. However, that was the excitement, the joy of following after the Lord, starting your ministry, having the dream, having the vision, having the mission statement, having all the things, core values, all the stuff, and then trauma hits. First love, all that's going on right there. Jesus is first in everything, and you're seeing it all through this. And then all of a sudden, as you walk with Him, talk with Him, you see miracles, you see signs, you attend the conferences, you attend the trainings, you go to all the leadership meetings, you get all the stuff going on. You're in the church, you're serving the church, you're volunteering, you're sacrificing, doing all these things for the work and the sake of the ministry in the name of Jesus. And then all of a sudden, Jesus doesn't become so popular anymore. He gets put on trial, and then in your faith gets shaken in the midst of this. You see some things. You see behind the curtain of ministry. Come on, somebody. You see behind the veil of certain things that are going on in the name of ministry. And then it's like, you know what? I don't even know. I love Jesus, but I don't know about this other stuff, you know? I'm just going to go back to fishing. I'm just going to go back physical therapy. I'm just going back real estate. I'm just going to go back to forget this stuff, man. Me and Jesus are good. We'll just do that. I'm close enough to Him to just keep myself warm. Come on. Come on.
That's right.
I would you be hot or cold, not warm. So now back to John 21. All the stuff has went through, all the things that they went through. He sees this, the Lord. He swims off and goes in. Verse 9. And when they got out on land, so Peter, this is Peter back. When they got out on land, they saw a a fire. Some translation will actually say a charcoal fire. Remember where we heard that before? A charcoal fire, which fish had laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter aboard and hauled in the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And also, although there were so many that the net was not torn, remember it was torn the last time they did this. And they had to beckon for partners, but this time the net wasn't torn. The net was whole. Selah. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Do you see this? Come and have breakfast. Now, none of the disciples dare ask Him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them. That should be triggering something. We went from the Last Supper to the first breakfast. Come on. Look at what happens from the Last Supper to the first breakfast. All kinds of trauma, all kinds of trial, all kinds of temptation, all kinds of fiery darts, fiery trials, testing of our faith. All the things can happen between the Last Supper and the first breakfast. Come and have breakfast. They knew it was Him. Now it was the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after He was raised from the dead. And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him he says, Lord, you know that I love you. And He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Now Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time. What do you think's happening there? Trauma. He's rehearsing the story of seeing the face of Jesus when he denied him by the fire. When Jesus looked at him in Luke 22, he's like, he recognizes the weight of his denial. Now he's got a little bit of hope because there was an invitation to come and dine at breakfast, right? But he's smelling that charcoal fire, sensory trauma. The same sensory things are being triggered. That charcoal fire that's there, he's smelling it and he's replaying that smell, is rehashing a memory. I remember the last time I smelt this thing, and it's when I denied him. And now I'm being questioned by him. And not just questioned once, but I'm questioned twice, and now I'm questioned a third time. And at this point, I believe Peter's rehashing that whole thing. And he's like, and that's why he was grieved. Peter was grieved right there. We skip over that. But that's real. Anybody in here ever been grieved trying to follow the Lord? Called to ministry? Intercession? You've seen demons cast out. You've seen the sick healed. You've seen prophetic words happen for you and even other people. You've seen all this stuff happen, but then something happens, life happens, trauma happens, whatever happens. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Now look here, the transition. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, Follow me. The next prophecy that Peter gets was, you're going to die a crucified death. Just the way I was stretched out. Your hands are going to be stretched out. So the first prophecy Peter got was denial. The second prophecy he gets is death. Teach that in your prophetic ministry 101. But so anyway, denial, you're going to deny, but you will follow after. Remember, there is a caveat to that prophetic word. You're going to deny, but you are going to follow after. And here's how you're going to follow after. You're going to go through all this sifting so you can go from being a sifted one to a sent one, a true apostle. All this trial, all this temptation, all this trauma. And then he says, follow me. What's happening here on this beach? It's a recreation story. It's a new creation story. He's recreating the same scenario that happened at the original calling in Luke 5. Just the way when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, right? What happens in the days of Noah? He washes the earth. He baptizes the earth afresh. He calls Noah out. Noah plants a vineyard, a garden, right? And then what happens? He says, be fruitful, multiply, subdue, have dominion, tend and keep. He gives them the same commission Adam had. It's the same. It was a recreation that happened. Same thing happened here. When Jesus shows up on the scene, he calls them out of their fishing lifestyle to go and be fishers of men. But they start out in ministry, and then their ministry gets hit Jesus doesn't become popular anymore. They get put on trial, traumas and wounds, and faithful are the wounds of a friend, right? It says, and it talks about woundedness in ministry and all the different things that go on here. And on the flip side of it, we're just like, I'm going back to fishing. And then in the midst of that, the scene is set as a reset. It's a reset. Now you're dealing with the resurrected Christ on the other side. And now that I've been resurrected, I'm going to resurrect you. Come on. Come on. Now that I'm revived, I'm going to revive you. Come on. And so we went from Last Supper to first breakfast. And from here, I'm going to come. There's an invitation of renewal. That's what that breakfast on the beach was, an invitation for a restoration. It was a meal that truly heals, a meal that brought about a renewal, a meal that brought about a wholeness in mind, body, and spirit. Why the 3 times? There was 3 denials. We are a tripart being, mind, body, spirit. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Those traumas weren't just in his mind, they were held in his body. And so in the midst of this, as he's being nourished in the obedience that he had, and then walking that obedience out, pursuing peace, jumping into chaos, because the chaos inside of him, he was jumping into the chaos waters, pursuing to the beach of Jesus there to come and taste and see that the Lord is good. And then Jesus, as a masterful apostle and a masterful prophet, teacher, shepherd, all those things, what does he do? He restores him to right fellowship. He restores his commission. He restores his assignment. And now,
an unhealthy disciple maker become commissioned and participate in the Great Commission? You can't do it if you're not whole.
Go to Acts 2. 100%. Acts 2. We're almost done, I promise. Acts chapter 2. It just keeps getting better and better. We're going to go to Acts 2, then we'll be in 1 Peter, and then we're done. Acts chapter 2. Any day now, Jason. Here we go. Yep. We know the story. It's the day of Pentecost. When the day of Pentecost had fully arrived, they're in one place, one mind. Suddenly there came a sound from heaven like a mighty rushing wind. It filled the house first, where they were sitting. Divided tongues of a fire appeared to them and rested upon each of them, or sat upon each of them. They were all filled with the Spirit and began to speak in tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And we go on down to see in verse 14, it says, but Peter, standing with the 11. Come on, John had him standing with those that were denying Christ at the trial by the fire. Come on, now you've got Peter being filled with fire, and now he went from standing at a fire of denial, going through his fiery trial, to now a fire is on Peter and in Peter, and he's standing with the 11 in front of everybody, proclaiming the excellencies of Christ, and he gives them the whole discourse from verse 15. All the way down, he says, look, this is that was spoken by the prophet Joel. And so he starts talking about the outpouring of the Spirit that's happening. He goes, these men are not drunk as you suppose. And so he starts breaking all this down. Why? Because he went through the process. He went from being a sifted one to a sent one. Even though he had his moments of denial, depression, shame, guilt, condemnation, all those things he fully experienced, but Jesus fully embraced those in the cross. Buried him with him and rose in the newness of life. And because of that, everything that he faced, everything that humanity could possibly face through depression, guilt, shame, condemnation, fear, doubt, all the different things, Jesus is not a high priest that can't sympathize with our weakness. He can fully sympathize with our weakness and then invite us to the table to come and taste and see that he's good. He can prepare a charcoal fire where we might have denied him in a past season or a past trial. That same fire fire that we denied him by, he's created a whole table of fire of his presence that he's invited us into to come and taste and see that he's good, that we might become made whole. Lifted up his voice and addressed them. Last verse, 1 Peter 4. First Peter. If you actually just read Peter, you know what he talks a lot about there in that first little bit? Talks about being called to be holy and being lovely stones and all that stuff. But then he gets into suffering. 1 Peter chapter 4. And go to verse 12. 1 Peter 4:12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial. Do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when His glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory, we talk about the glory of God and the Spirit of glory filling a room, but we don't ever connect it to a suffering. But the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or evildoer or as a meddler. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, as a what? Christian. Let him not what? Be shamed. Don't let there be shame in it. But let him glorify God in that name. For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God, and we're seeing that. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? Do you see what he said? For if any one of you suffers as a Christian, don't be ashamed, but let him glorify God in the midst of that. Don't tell me Peter didn't wrestle with shame.
Sure he did.
How can this man write this? Think about it. We got to connect all the dots. Everything that he walked through, he was able, through inspiration, to put this down in pen. Beloved, don't be surprised at the fiery trial. I was once at a fiery trial. I was standing by the fire when he was on trial, not knowing that I was on trial as well. My faith was being tested, and I failed. But there's hope, because he didn't fail. Because he didn't fail, I can have hope. I'm going to fail him all the time. But there's grace, there's peace, there's joy. There's all of that if I can turn, if I can run to him, if I can dive off my boat of doubt, fear, guilt, shame, condemnation, and swim to the beach and have breakfast of restoration and the breakfast of renewal that in him. And I can smell those fiery coals, the same coals that I was standing by when I denied him, now become coals of invitation to partake of them. And then there's a burning coal that comes and touches my lips, so I can stand up on the day of Pentecost and proclaim the riches and glories of Christ. Come on. He went from denying him to ultimately what? Dying for him. So much so that he said, don't hang me the same way you hung my Christ. Don't hang me the same way. Turn me upside down. I'm not worthy. He was crucified upside down. A whole nother thing. He can take your traumas and transform them to testimony. He anticipated the trauma. Luke 22:32 says, I've prayed for you. He revisits the memory with healing presence. That was John 21 when he recreated the charcoal fire. He restores his identity through his calling, feed my sheep. He empowers him through his Spirit, the fire at Pentecost. Jesus transforms wounds into ministry. Peter, strengthen others as I've strengthened you. Come on.
Yep.
Jesus doesn't discard sifted disciples. He restores them and sends them. Come on. Where do you think Peter gets his theology of fiery trials?
A testimony.
Come on. He went from the trauma, the fire of failure, fire of denial, to the fire of restoration. And he went from ashes of yesterday to the fire of today. Pentecost. Hallelujah.
I would have to say that the smell of a charcoal fire changed everything after that encounter with Jesus.
100%.
He never went back to that old way. He went back to the restoration of who Christ is.
Amen. Wholeness. Shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. Trauma is not weakness. The prophets felt it. The apostles felt it. Come on. I've showed you. I showed you last week the prophets, and I showed you this week an apostle. Who are we to think we're exempt?
I think we know we're not.
He doesn't shame depression. He ministers to it.
That's right. Come on.
The atonement addresses not just spiritual wounds, not just physical wounds, but also emotional wounds. The renewal of the mind retains the healing from the trauma memory. Last week we talked a little bit more about the science behind it and those things, but this week I just wanted to show you how Peter went from being by the fire to a fiery trial to being on fire. Now I submit to you that we have that same right, same access. So I don't care what you faced in the past season, what traumas you've experienced, the presence of the Lord is here to heal it. This altar's become a beach. Come on. This altar's got fiery coals of invitation and renewal. Why? Because there's an assignment on the other side of the table. There's an assignment on the other side of this that I need you to go sit in the house of prayer for an enduing of power so you can proclaim and feed my lambs. And we see later on, he talks about being an elder and a shepherd, an apostle with a shepherd's heart. Amen? Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more episodes and ways to connect with us, please go to remnantfire.com.